I realized that I was just completely overwhelmed. I was spread thin, and I was, living on a few hours of sleep at night, and I was trying to do all these things.
So you chose to go in the military? Hold on. Let me slow this down. Hey folks, Jerry here with episode 9 of the Pioneers of Insight podcast featuring this guy, Marcus Aurelius Anderson, mindset coach, author, and TEDx speaker who's got an incredibly powerful story of change from the inside out. Marcus suffered full body paralysis while serving in the U.S. Army, and he talks about what it took for him to make that change and come out of that crisis. Now, he's a mindset coach, so he's really got the skill set to deep dive this. He's also got an incredible amount of wisdom that he gained through that experience. In this episode, Marcus talks about the influence of his historical name and where that came from. He talks about drawing on the strengths of the Stoics while in the deepest and darkest depths of that crisis. And he also gives us a sense of where he's headed. He's the author of The Gift of Adversity, a book which is already creating quite a stir like his TED Talk did. All right, folks, hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. This is truly a wild ride. I look forward to getting your feedback. You can send that to community@TOOWimedia.com. All right, folks, plug in, enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side. Hey, Marcus. Welcome to the Pioneers of Insight podcast. Thanks for showing up.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me. My father's the one that gave me the name Marcus Aurelius, and he passed when I was a young boy. I was probably 5, so I didn't get to spend very much time with him, but that name carries on, and so it's interesting how even though I didn't know my grandfather, how that one decision was able to create such a tremendous amount of impact on my life.
So when did you become aware of the history behind the name? Like, how old were you?
I used the name Mark as a little boy because it was a little boy's name. Mm-hmm. I got to be about 12 or 13 when I actually was able to pick up some of the writings. And, meditations at 13 is, it's way over your head. It's really impossible to pick that up. But I still really liked it a lot. I liked what he was trying to say. And even if I couldn't grasp the specifics, I was able to get the conceptual ideals of it. So growing up, you can give things meaning or you can not give things meaning. And by having that name bestowed upon me, it was really something that sort of forced me to understand meaning in all things.
What's different about your family that they're like, let's use that name? What would you say? What would you say is a little different about your family that they have that sense of connection to history?
I don't even know, because my father appreciated the name, but he thought it was too much. My mother appreciated the name, and it was the same thing because that's the way it began, where my grandfather's like, he needs a strong name like Marcus, like Marcus Aurelius, like a strong name. My father worked in the petroleum industry. He was an engineer for them. So there was a tremendous amount of work ethic in that. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say that there is some highly educated or highly sophisticated mentality behind the name, yet it lends itself in that manner very easily. So,
well, I know I'm pulling on this thread a lot here.
Certainly. But
maybe you're playing it down just a little bit. I mean this. Your grandfather chose a pretty powerful name, whether we can call that prescient, whether we can call that maybe a flair for the dramatic, whatever it happens to be. It shows your lineage a little bit, right? It shows some sort of connection to the power of ideas.
Indeed.
I already hear that. So let me ask you the traditional question I usually start with. Now that we got a little bit of a sense of your identity from your family and the power of that name. Marcus, how do you see yourself showing up every day in the world?
I guess there are a lot of ways to look at it. The Marcus before he was injured, Marcus of younger, if you will, was just trying to help as many people as he could and make as much of an impact as he could. And the Marcus now is probably the same, but I've been granted a little bit more of a platform in which to do so. Whether it be words or whether it be actions, I try to help people understand how powerful they are and how good they have it. And having those two ideas of self-resilience and strength and gratitude, when they're coupled, it gives a tremendous amount of impact that you can create on not only the people around you, but thousands of people that stem from that as well. Mm-hmm. So I would say that I'm just, I wouldn't say I'm an influencer. I wouldn't say that I would say I'm a teacher before I'm anything else.
Mm-hmm. So you see yourself as a teacher. So how do you do that every day? I mean, I'm connecting with you through media because you have some sort of influence. So I'll go ahead and call you an influencer. Maybe you're not comfortable with that, but you stepped onto a pretty big stage, which was TED, and you gave a pretty powerful talk. Thank you. Maybe it was the teacher that brought you there.
It might have been. I've been doing martial arts since I was around the same age of reading Marcus Aurelius's material. And I think that all those things really sort of dovetailed. Martial, the word itself means warlike. So understanding the idea of, for example, if you and I are both defending ourselves and we're throwing punches, the only thing that separates a barbarian from a warrior is the code and the ethic and the ethos. Mm-hmm. So the actual punch or the actual impact of the punch is no different, but it's the way that you're able to decide and dictate why you're doing this. Mm-hmm. Am I doing this to take money from somebody, or am I doing this because I'm defending somebody else who is unable to defend themselves? And that's where the intent is important.
Mm-hmm. Intention. So what's your intention every day when you get up in the morning?
My intention every day is to try to live my life to the max. After my injury, it helped me realize that that's a tremendous amount of, we always talk about, live your life to to your fullest, but nobody really has that. Nobody really seems to have that sense of urgency required to do it. And they read all these quotes and they have all this expectations, but without urgency, we don't really get as much done. Mm-hmm. But after what happened to me, it really gave me a sense of urgency, unlike anything else that, death gives you an urgency in life like nothing else.
Yes, and that's where we can transition into what I call the low, because we can hear you talking about and how you show up every day. You see yourself as a teacher. Your intention is to create an impact and help people understand maybe their own personal power. I hear that in your in the way that you approach. So how did you get so much power behind your intention? What would you consider your low point in your life? And I know it's out there and it's on TED Talk, but we're going to kind of try to dig a little bit deeper into this, because I hear, let me help the listener out as we go into this. This is what I hear already. I hear the impact of history on you from a really early age, whether it just be a name. I hear the desire to be, I hear a young man who was digging in deeply because that at an early age, 12 years old, you're digging into some pretty deep philosophy, right? It had an influence. Number 3, I hear how you see yourself showing up every day in the world, and that's as a teacher. You said not an influencer, maybe because you're not comfortable with that, but I hear this, your intention behind it. It's to teach. So let's get into that experience. What gave you so much energy behind that intention to teach? What was your low point?
In 2012, while preparing to deploy with the military, I got injured seriously. I was injured and I was paralyzed from the neck down.
How old were you?
I was 40. As a matter of fact, on my 40th birthday, I was in an ICU in a bed, wondering if I was ever going to be able to walk.
Take us to the day. So give us the big picture first. Like, how old are you? Who's in your life and who's important to you at that moment?
I'm 40 years old at that point. I'm in the military. So the people that are important to me are the people that I'm serving with, the immediate man to your left, the man to your right, my squad leader, my team leader, and all the other people that depend on each other.
What service were you in?
I was in the Army. I was in the Light Infantry Division at Fort Drum in upstate New York.
So I'm a vet too, and you may know that about my story, right?
I do.
I was in the Navy and I failed out of Navy SEALs, and that's part of my story, right? I went on to be an intel specialist. Yep. So what was your rating, and what sent you into the military?
At 38 years old, my great uncle who was in Vietnam was a big influence on me as well. My parents were divorced when I was younger. So when I was living with my mother, my great uncle was a really big father figure. And he was very much in the same alignment as my grandfather, talking about, self-control, perseverance, humility, hard work, doing the right thing, integrity. Taught me about fieldcraft. And I wouldn't say like fieldcraft like in the military, but he took me hunting, taught me the importance of being connected to nature, that nature isn't really out to get you, but it's also not going to do you any favors. Mm-hmm. So if you're out there and it's cold, you need to figure out how to stay warm. Mm-hmm. Don't sit there and expect somebody or something to just be delivered to you on a silver platter. Mm. So having that, again, like you say, looking at what my grandfather said and then seeing that influence at a younger age as well.
So you're 38. There's the story of powerful men in your own family that gave you some skills, maybe to pique your interest in that, right?
38. Usually at that point, 35 is normally the window. Yeah. But when I went in there, my great uncle had just passed, and also I had just gotten divorced.
Oh, wow.
So I was in chiropractic school in Atlanta at Life University. So I had a year and a half left to finish my doctorate. I was going to chiropractic school. I was bartending. So I'm taking 25 hours of doctorate level courses. I'm bartending 40 hours a week.
That's a lot, right? It's like to take on in a doctorate program. And a lot of people may have to struggle to do that, but I'm just giving you credit. That's a lot.
Well, thank you. And so that was a devastating 1-2 punch. And it really made me just sit back and set me on my ass. And I had to just sit back and say, am I doing this for the right reasons? Am I doing this for me? Am I doing this for somebody else?
So how did you determine that?
Well, the burnout from school and the burnout from the physical working as a bartender, which I love bartending in Atlanta. I love the people I met. The money was really good for the work, but I realized that I was just completely overwhelmed. I was spread thin, and I was, living on a few hours of sleep at night, and I was trying to do all these things.
So you chose to go in the military? Hold on. Let me slow this down. And now, a quick word from our sponsor. Josh is the founder of Weevil Outdoor Supply Company. He loves creating killer apparel for outdoor people. But his job, he says, that's about putting out fires daily. Here's what he called a typical day.
So we created a new jersey. I built it. It's a ride jersey. It minimalizes neck rub. It's a great jersey.
But there was a catch.
We decided to move our production for all of our t-shirts to a new factory.
And so they do, and they put in some new orders.
It's approved. I shoot the photos in the studio. When the jerseys arrive, we pump it up on Instagram, deliver the jerseys. They're loving it.
Until
Matt calls me 4 or 5 times and I know something's wrong.
Matt's the head of sales.
He's like,
the logo's upside down. Not upside down, it's like inverted.
And we're like, oh my God, all the patches are on upside down. How did they not see that?
Weevil, get off the couch and go outside. To check out killer hats, shirts, jerseys, and apparel, visit weeviloutdoor.com. So you chose to go in the military? Hold on. Let me slow this down. Let me slow this down for everybody, because I'm getting a sense of your superpower. I'm always looking for in a person in an interview where their sense of strength starts to show up. And this is something where the listener can start to sink their teeth into you a little bit. Here you are. You're in this window, this difficult window of time as a man, right? You're at an age which is definitely atypical to join the military.
Yes.
We get a sense of the kind of person you are, right? There's an achiever in you. You're not just out to get an education. You're out to get a doctorate. You're working a bartending job. You're completely overwhelmed. But something about Marcus says, maybe for me, the idea of a good reset is heading into a challenge that most people would never choose to do because it's such a level of challenge. What would you tell the listener is unique about Marcus at that particular time, that idea even seemed to be a possibility?
It really gave me a sense of, dare I say, mortality. After my uncle passed, he was, in my mind, he was superhuman. He never told me the specifics about what he did in the special forces, but yet I heard from other people in the family, all these amazing things that he had done. And I'd always wanted to serve, but being married and wanting to start a family, of course, your spouse is not excited about the idea of, hey, you want to follow in the same steps as your great uncle who did all this crazy stuff? No, that's not really a good idea. And the same thing with chiropractic school. I'd worked so hard to get my, Bachelor of Human Biology. You're trying to work through this. And then when all those things stopped, and it was one kind of pressure that was applied more, and another kind of pressure that was taken off. So it made me kind of sit back and say, the world will not stop spinning if I stop doing this. The world will not stop spinning if I decide that I want to do something for me. And the thing that sounds appealing right now, and like you say, is a reset. Joining the military is the ultimate way to begin fresh again. Though it may be a bit of a rough start, it's still a fresh start.
So we get into these themes a lot on the show, that before we start to really get a sense of our personal strength, there's often some major transition point in our lives that's playing in the background. And I hear this. You're having to let go of a sense of who you are a bit, in your relationship. It was falling apart, right? There was a divorce that was going on. So there's a major stressor and a transition going on there. Educationally, you've dug in deep, you got your boots, sunk into the program, but there's a need for a change. And it woke up a pretty powerful part of yourself. And I hear behind it the story of the powerful men and influencers in your life. So Marcus, at 38 years old, at its time of deep transition and struggle, steps into the military. All right. So take us to that story.
So I step into the military at Fort Benning, Georgia, and I am not only the oldest guy in the platoon, I'm the oldest guy. I'm older than a lot of my drill sergeants.
Get your arms up. Certainly all you're holding is a water bottle. Get it up.
Did you find that your age was more of a challenge, or did it provide some benefits for you in terms of your relationships when you stepped in?
It was a challenge in some aspects, but within the first week, that was the litmus test. Once I got beyond that first beginning of the week, where your first week in basic training in the infantry is not exactly a resort of the B&B, so you're trying to figure out where you stand. But then I found that people will naturally gravitate towards an older person that's there because they need a mentor, or you have guys that are 18, 19 years old that have never been away from home before.
So I'm interested in that part just a little bit, because you just stepped out of a divorce, and here you are stepping into a major challenge in your life. But I also hear this showing up in terms of the relationships. You're becoming sort of a mentor. There's the teacher showing up and kind of a father figure.
I was the military just calls it leadership, but all it means is that you're able to, you see somebody doing something wrong, or you see somebody doing something that, they're just making it more hard than it needs to be. It's like, why make it so laborious? Don't spend your mental energy worrying about all this other stuff. Think about this. Think about the task at hand, and then do that, and then go to the next task. All we have to do right now, guys, is get through PT so we can get to lunch. Get beyond that so that we can get to the grenade range, and now we can get to dinner. And then when we get done with that, you get done with your fire watch, and maybe you can get a little bit of sleep. And you just keep moving forward in these small incremental steps, as opposed to saying to yourself, oh my God, this is 4 months, and then if I go to airborne, and then if I do this, and I'm never going to make it through this, and this is this insurmountable mountain. If you think like that, it will absolutely devastate you.
Were you really already stepping into that role as a leader, or did you find yourself falling into the background?
I actually tried to stay quiet because, one, I want to see what the lay of the land is. I want to see who is who. I want to see who is what direction the wind blows. And there's a lot of personalities that will inflate and deflate as we go into these kind of situations. Once I could kind of see who is going to be either a troublemaker or a person who is, more braggadocious than necessary in my mind, then I could get a good beat on the situation and then I could act. But the people that were kind of proximal to me, those are the ones that I influenced. And then as we continue to go on, it would spread a little bit. So
you were leading from behind even in boot camp.
Yeah, leading from behind, or the Taoists say I believe Confucius says, if you want to lead the people, you walk next to them, as opposed to being in front or in the back where you're yelling. Mm-hmm. If you're with them, they have a lot more respect for you and they understand that you're with them, as opposed to, hey, go do this. There is that component clearly, but I found, at least in that area, and I was allowed to have the luxury of doing that. At that point, I was just like a new guy like anybody else. And even though I was older, I didn't have to worry about having any additional, at least in my mind, I felt like I was freed up to be able to do what I felt was right, as opposed to, okay, like as a bartender, I was the bar manager, I was the head bartender, so I had to schedule everybody and I had to be the mediator. The same thing in school. I'm the doctor, so I'm adjusting, I'm doing these things. Here, there was no expectation, and that took the pressure off.
So you're successfully navigating through boot camp. You're leading aside, right? Or you're with the class. You're transitioning out of this big crisis in your life. You take this step. What does your family think about what's going on?
What are you, crazy? Are you out of your mind? What the hell? I mean, even the recruiter, when I came in, I took the PT test. I maxed the PT test out, and he's like, okay. And then he says, what about an ASVAB? So I crushed that. And he's like, okay, you're 38, you're in great shape, you're a natural leader, and you're intelligent as hell. What are you doing here? Did you lose a bet with God? And, I just told him what was going on. And he said, well, that's fantastic. In the Army, look at all these test scores. You can do whatever you want. I was like, fantastic. I wanted to be infantry. And he said the same thing my family did. No, wait a minute. You don't understand, Anderson. You can do anything. You can do this, that, and the other. Family wasn't real happy, but at that point I'd already committed. I'd already signed the contract, and this is what I was going to do.
What were you doing? What was your role in the infantry?
In the infantry, I was an E4, and it looked like I was being given more leadership roles. They had tried to put me in different positions, because if you're intelligent, that's something that they want to exploit as much as they can. But at the same time, I was still trying to, I wanted to go to Ranger School. I wanted to drop my packet for Special Forces. I wanted to learn as much practical information as I could en route to that. But at the same time, I didn't want to get sidetracked and get stuck doing something that was far and away from what I had intended to do when I enjoyed in the first place. Being groomed into a leadership role was important, and seeing how to lead men from a military standpoint was very important as well.
Okay. So we got a sense of where you're at as a person, what your relationships look like. We got a sense of, what was blowing up in your world when you took that step into infantry. You go back to a core identity piece. And then everybody who is likely here is here because they've seen you talk about this critical low point in your life. Take us to that day. What's going on and what happened?
So that morning I wake up and there's somebody beating on my door. So I go to roll out of bed and I am able to roll my neck a little bit, but the rest of my body won't move. And for just a second, I sort of chuckle at myself. And I was like, well, I guess I'm pretty sore. And then I can't move. And I'm realizing that this is beyond just the idea that my neck will move, but my body won't move. And now I'm starting to freak out a little bit, because in school, we learned all these differential diagnoses, and you can go through and see what's going on. So mentally, I'm going through and saying, okay, do I feel anything? Do I feel numbness? Do I feel pain? Do I feel shock? Do I feel like stabbing pain? And I just didn't feel anything. And that's when I started to panic, because that's basically my worst fear realized. Luckily, because there was somebody beating on my door, they at least had an idea that, I was not in a good place. So I'm yelling, they're knocking on the door and they're like,
what do you mean you can't move?
I was like, I can't move. And they're like,
okay, whatever.
But they also know that I'm not the kind of guy that's going to mess around with. So once they get the door open and once they get in there and they realize that I indeed cannot move, that's when we get to triage, and that's whenever we start the track that led me down to what happened to me when I was operated on.
So can you tell the listener what was happening the day before that might have led to the injury?
Absolutely. There was no specific method of onset, but from the minute that I got there at my base, we were preparing to deploy. There was constantly this urgency of, we're going to deploy in the next couple of months, get ready. So even though it's an intense training unit, they click it up a few notches on top of that. So the week leading up to that, we had done a lot of ruck marching. We had done a lot of rappelling. We'd done a lot of things where there was a lot of impact on your body, but it was nothing really more than normal. But I had found, in hindsight, I look back and I had a lot of numbness in my hands and my feet. But it's in February. It's in upstate New York. It's negative 20 degrees outside. Of course your hands are going to be cold. Of course your feet are going to be cold. But the day before, when I had got done, we went for a 5-mile run, which is easy for us. And my legs just would not go. I couldn't keep the cadence. I was able to sort of keep up, but it just felt like they were moving independent of my body.
Did you tell anybody about that struggle when you were going through it?
No, you don't say that. Yeah. I try to push it down. Now, the thing was, I could see the people that knew me looking out of the corner of their eye, looking at me. It's like, why is this guy falling back in the run? Why is this guy having a hard time, holding on to the pull-up bar or the rope? Because I have a strong grip and I can usually do pretty much anything physically. And, they just kind of, well, maybe he's having a bad day, whatever it is. And then once I got back and I took a shower, got ready to try to get breakfast, I took a hot shower, and that normally makes you feel better. And I'm looking at my hands and my feet for signs of frostbite, but there's nothing. But as I get out of the shower, it takes everything in my proprioception to keep me from falling down. And so I dry off, I get my ACUs on, and I try to put on my socks and my boots. This is something that you do every day in the military. It should take you about 2 minutes to do all of that. And it turned into a 15-minute ordeal just trying to get my socks on. My boots looked like they were tied by a drunk 3-year-old. It was much more laborious than it should have been. And at that point, I'm like, man, there's something going on here. But I don't have time for that right now. I have to get a formation. And my whole goal was let me just get back. Let me just get back to my bed. Let me get some sleep. I want to be fine. Tomorrow morning, everything's going to be fine. It's not going to be a big deal. And then that's when I woke up paralyzed.
So you find out you're paralyzed from the doctor. What was your response?
Well, as stupid as it's going to sound, they send me to the hospital in Syracuse, and they're sending me down there. And in my mind, I keep thinking to myself, man, I hope this doesn't take long because I got to get deployed soon. I got guys counting on me, and I had these responsibilities, and I've just been given this, leadership role, and I want to make sure that I don't take that away from me. I got to make sure I'm getting back in time. Maybe they can just give me a shot. Maybe they're overreacting. And I also realized that it's that first point of, it's denial. It's the stages of grief. It's the first thing where it's like, oh, well, this shouldn't be that big of a deal. And once I get there and they get me on the gurney, and now you have half a dozen people running with you on the gurney, and they're shining lights in your eyes, and they're doing diagnosis on your feet, and people are poking and prodding on you and putting all this stuff on you. Now it's like, is all this really necessary? I mean, come on, guys, let's just get this done. They get me down for the MRI, and then after the MRI, they bring me back into my room or into the holding room. And they say, well, we're going to get you prepped. And I was like, prepped for what exactly? They're like, well, for surgery, dumbass. And I even remember asking them, it's like, do I have any say in this? And the doctor looks at me, he's like, if you want to live, no. He's like, you're not going to be able to breathe soon. And that's when I was like, okay, well, guess we're doing this. So
let me slow you down here, because this is a big moment in your life, right?
It is.
I hear two stories colliding. There was the you getting back to your core identity as a 38-year-old saying, I'm going to go back to the warrior to find my true sense of meaning, right? And that was pretty audacious of you at the time, because I hear how much you had to leave. You had to leave your family. You had to leave a sense of identity as an academic, the teacher in that regard, and you said, I'm going to go this route. Now here you are at this critical point of your life, right? Where you had tethered yourself to this sense that this is where I'm going to find true meaning for myself again. And now it's being taken away. What are you emotionally, what's going on with you, and how are you trying to make how are you trying to make meaning out of what is going on at that particular period in time in terms of who you're going to be?
That's the hardest part. If you look at people every day today, usually their occupation is their identity.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, again, the infantry, the warrior scholar component is key, but it was very hard. And at that point, I didn't realize, again, that this was going to be something permanent. Now, once they told me that we were doing surgery and they rolled me down there, and there's, about a dozen people down there. And when you see a dozen people waiting for you outside of the operating room, that is not a good feeling. That's, if it takes that many people to make sure that you aren't dying, that's not the feeling that you want to have. Luckily, they sort of explained themselves and said, listen, this person is a backup. If you're an anesthesiologist, something happens to them, there's an anesthesiologist here. This person's an overlap for this person, which is great. But it was pretty brutal to be in a position where I'm searching for identity desperately, and I'm trying to do the best that I can. And then I finally decide on something that will give me some sort of meaning or higher purpose. Mm-hmm. And then to have that ripped away from you again it's almost beyond words, because you've done all these things leading to this point, and now that you're here, and now that you've made this decision, and then that's taken from you, you don't know where to go next. And for me, again, making that decision ultimately is what led me to the bed, led me to the point where I couldn't move. And so now this adversity is facing me right in the face, and I cannot get away from it. So
yeah, you had a plan, and life smacked you right upside the head, right? There's a predicament that you're in that many people here that are listening might find themselves in their own lives, right? Whether that be in their own personal journeys, their success journeys, their achievement journeys. You have a plan, right? And we tend to do this. We get pretty rigid about how we see things unfolding for ourselves. You took a bold leap. I'm going to be an infantryman, and I'm going to be a leader, and I'm going to teach you that role. It's ripped away. Now life is saying, who are you going to become? You're paralyzed. You're 38 years old. You just come out of a divorce. What did the journey look like to recovery?
My 40th birthday was in the ICU, paralyzed, and that's a big kick in the ass. Like I've said before, for most people, a 40th birthday is a big positive milestone. You go back and you look at what you've accomplished, and like we said before, in life there are three things that can happen: what you hope will happen, what you fear will happen, and then what actually happens. The beginning of it for me, at least, was first of all hoping that I'd recover. Against hope, hoping some way that I would recover. After laying in a bed for 3 months and not recovering, that's when I had to really start to accept this. And I was angry as hell. I was mad at everyone around me. The person that I was the maddest at, though, was myself, because I felt like I had wasted my life up to that point. I didn't feel like I had a whole lot of meaning or purpose. And so in some ways it felt almost like the universe was punishing me for wasting all the time that I'd had prior to that. When I found myself in that place and I was angry.
Can I ask you one question before you go on? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Where are you at? Are you in a hospital? Are you at home? Who's around you?
I'm at the ICU, and then not long after that, they get me back to my room. I don't really tell my family how bad this is because, one, I don't want to scare them.
Wow.
And I also don't want them up there. If this is the last thing that they see of me, I don't want them to see me laying in a bed in a neck brace, unable to move.
So your superpowers, I hear a superpower starting to work against you a little bit. One of the superpowers is unbelievable resilience and resourcefulness as a person to make a incredibly terrifying leap to kind of take a step to re-identify yourself and go to a core identity piece. But there's a part of yourself that with that superpower that says, I don't have to share my struggle. I don't have to share my struggle. And there's a family cutoff going on at the same time that you're in this. So you don't have much in terms of support, emotional support. You're totally drawing on yourself, sounds like, and maybe the hospital support a little bit.
Yeah, for the most part. And again, I'm hoping that this is just something that's temporary, and it eventually becomes readily apparent that is not the case. And it may sound silly, but when I got to that point, I got so angry and I was so depressed, and if I was physically able, I would have taken my own life because I couldn't find any meaning. I felt like everything that I had that was even worth anything was gone, was ripped from me. Marcus Aurelius says that if it is endurable, then endure it. And so I kept, these Stoic ideas and these philosophies of endure. But I was going to a point of that I never even would have imagined. It's like,
well, this is where your story comes full circle to the first decision about your life, which was your name. It's your grandfather that gave you that gift, right? Absolutely. So here you are as a man. I call these the no way out scenarios. This is where the most people in life that I hear that are achievers that overcome some tremendous challenge, they had to face it. Like, there's no way out of this unless you find a way out. So you're starting to draw on these old messages that were given to you, not by Marcus Aurelius, but your grandfather, right? And from there, you start to go back to those ideas. So what did recovery look like? How did you do it?
I think just like we were saying, the mindset shift is what was important. Adversity offers you no other choice. And when there's no other choice, the choice is simple. So you have to push. You have to get more from yourself.
Can I correct you there? Your choice was hard. It wasn't. The simple choice would have been like, I'm giving up.
Well, I went to that point. I did get to that point. When I considered taking my own life, I actually allowed it to wash over me. The lucky thing was that I wasn't able to act on it. Just like, with yin yang or trying to push against a stronger opponent, I can push against a guy who's bigger than me all day, but I'm probably not going to win. So if I'm pushing the whole time, what the hell should I be doing? Well, maybe I need to turn into this. Maybe I need to get in front of this. And so that's when I went back to, again, those teachings. I went back to those ideas and said to myself, okay, what is the lesson? What am I missing? What is the thing that I know that I act like I'm not knowing about this? What am I overlooking? And I try to find something to be, thankful for or grateful for. And for a month, I couldn't think of anything. I was just pissed. And then the only thing I could think of was, well, if I'd have been deployed and I'd have been with my buddies, maybe they would have got killed trying to help me. Maybe I would have got that Chinook shot down when they had to air vac me. So the only thing I can think of is, luckily I didn't get another half a dozen or a dozen people killed trying to save me. So
your journey started inward first, finding hope through your ideas, right? Where did it start to lead into actions? Where did the movement start to come in? Once I turned into it, and instead of resisting it, I just went into it and said, what am I going to learn from this? Once I started seeing my adversity as a gift instead of a curse, about a week later, my index finger on my left hand started moving a little bit. And that was that small amount of light that I needed to give me something, to give me an idea, to give me hope, to push. Help. This is your talk on TED Talk, right? This is where the moment that we're at in the interview. Yes, sir. Help the listener understand how you can possibly turn paralysis, the potential loss of your identity, the potential loss of your plan for yourself as a teacher and a leader, as a soldier. How do you turn that into a gift? What was the moment? I look at adversity as the ultimate form of accountability. It is a teacher.
for better or for worse, pain and discomfort are the best teachers. And there's usually something that we had to find within those. What it forced me to do is it forced me to get rid of all of the semantics and all the bullshit, and it made me really get down to bare bones and say, okay, what do I believe?
Mm-hmm.
What do I want? What's really a true priority? We talk about priorities all day, but I learned at that point that all the stuff that I thought was important wasn't.
Mm.
All these things that I was doing for other people wasn't important because it was their lives, it wasn't mine. The things that I was trying to do was based on other things that wasn't important to me. So this allowed me to get down to brass tacks, down to the foundation, and it made me start thinking, well, what do I really want? What is important to me?
Was that a process, or was there a moment that you remember where you're like, all right, I got to turn this around. This actually is an opportunity for me.
Yeah, it was a very slow process. Like I said, I went through anger. I went through, that depression. And then finally I gave into it from a depression standpoint. And I realize now that dip is probably where a lot of people actually may act on suicide. It helped me understand people that think suicidally because they don't necessarily want to kill themselves. They want to live desperately, but they cannot find something to live for.
Oh, that's a huge insight.
Right?
I hope everybody can hear that. Behind suicide, people on the outside often think they don't see the crisis. They don't see the real challenge. It's not about dying. It's about the only option a person sees to live.
That's
right?
exactly
Whether that's letting go of the struggle, and that's living, right?
That's exactly it. Or the idea that they feel like they are completely out of control and they have this reactionary mindset, but they know that the common denominator is, well, there's one thing I can control. I can end this.
Well, maybe that is something that we can give to the listener as a gift, because that's the origin of the gift.
Absolutely.
It's the surrender, right?
That's exactly
I
right.
can't live the life the way that I want to live it, but I do want to live. So I'm going to give up.
I'm going to give up. Yep. You're absolutely right.
That was a surrender. It's not a quitting. It's a surrender. There's a difference.
There's absolutely a difference, because when you surrender, it allows you the opportunity to begin again and learn. So in jiu-jitsu, for example, if you get me into a submission hold or a choke hold and I tap out, it doesn't mean that I lost. It means it's my opportunity to begin to learn again, this time smarter than before.
Wow. So you come through this paralysis. In the moment everything comes together for you as your pinky starts to, you get some movement in your pinky. I imagine that was a pretty nice moment.
It was a phenomenal moment. The problem was about a week later, everything else started moving. And I say that's a problem because about 3 weeks after that, I was right back to square one. And it was almost like another test. It was like I had tested my resolve. I had come to this idea of surrender. And it was almost like the universe was saying, okay, well, you learned the lesson and you took it to heart. Can you continue to hold on to this? Can you continue to look at the truth, even though it's going to be something that's very tough?
So when you say taken away, you went back to full paralysis again?
I went back to, right back to where I was before.
Oh,
and that's when it was really hard. But I kept that humility. I emptied my cup and I said, okay, what is there to learn from this? What did I learn just from this last month? And I maintained that. I held on to the center of, this is where I need to get to. This is what I need to learn. And I'm going to surrender again. I'm going to tap again so that I can learn, hopefully, more. Our natural inclination as human beings is, once we've had a traumatic experience, is to get as far away from that as we possibly can emotionally. We don't want to have to go back to that again. It's like, well, thank God I'm through that. But by doing that, that distances us and it makes it impossible for us to remember what we just went through. And oftentimes we repeat the same mistake. When I got back to that, and it was almost like I got bitch slapped by the universe. It's like, did you forget? I got back down to that point again. And then I was like, no, I'm happy. I'm grateful.
So it's vulnerability. You were learning about vulnerability.
Vulnerability, stoicism, humility, all those things were coming together. And it made me take it to heart. It made me really understand it. So even when my hands were the only things that were moving, that was a miracle.
Well, let me put this for the listener, just nice and plain language, because you're very conceptual. I can hear that. Your superpower was turning against you, right? When you were in that struggle a little bit. That was one of the things you had to get through. Like, I can just shut down and I can find a way to grind through this, right?
Yeah,
and then the process breaks you down, you surrender, and on the other side, You go backwards again. But then you go, crap, it really is important for me to be in touch with the emotional process in this. And you start to make progress again. So let me take you forward, because I don't want to go too much longer. I thought it was important that you get as much of that story out as possible. What do you feel the listener needs to know? Because they're all in their own challenges. Whether, a challenge, each of us faces challenges that we need in our life. Whether we find ourselves successful, there's a challenge there. Whether we find ourselves behind what we want to be, like we have a goal and we're not there yet, we have our challenges. What do you need to tell the listener about the lessons from that challenge? What do they need to know?
I would tell them that adversity is a gift. Adversity is your opportunity to learn, and that there is something to be learned from that hardship. Adversity for everybody is relative. And in my TEDx talk, I talk about that. In my book, I talk about that. So it's not about who's gone through more. It's about what is relative to you at that moment. Mm-hmm. Is what you're facing the most difficult thing you've faced? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being paradise and 10 being hell, where is this on that scale? And it makes you really, really honestly sit back and say, you know what, this is about a 3 and I'm just complaining about it. Or this is about a 4, but I can easily get through it if I would just mentally commit. But it's that whining, that emotional laziness that allows us to, extend suffering a lot longer than it needs to be. Just go into it. It's going to suck. Okay, I get that. Embrace the suck. Take the gift of adversity that it has to give you and get to the other side of that. And then once you're to the other side, perspective is everything. Once we look through it and that's where we get past it, we look and we say, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Mm.
So what do you do in your life now to stay in touch with those lessons? And how does that experience of going through that inform your success and happiness journey every day? How do you use it?
What I do every day now is as I was saying before, that once we get past something that's traumatic, lots of times we try to forget it. What I try to do is I try to give myself, almost micro adversities every day. So I'll fast 2 or 3 times a week just to mentally keep myself centered. Just drinking water or just drinking something to kind of keep me on, healthy, obviously. Using that discipline and putting it into practice as opposed to forgetting about it, and voluntarily and intentionally seeking out discomfort. It doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be something that will allow me to get a little bit more resilient all the time. Mm-hmm. And by doing those small things like that, whether it be working out, nobody likes to, push themselves really hard when they work out. They might, but then again, I've kind of learned that there's that emotional point where even when you think you're as far as you can go, you've still got, another 30 or 40% to go. Mm-hmm. So I try to live in that realm, in those blind spots that most people have. And that is what allows me to push forward. Even when I speak, when I write, when I coach, that's what I try to do, is I try to give people that little glimpse so that they can get the wisdom that I've gleaned without having to pay the price that I did to attain mm-hmm. it. Absolutely.
What one practice do you think is your most powerful that you want to give the listener? For discipline, because you're saying discipline is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, discipline, motivation is great, but discipline is what is left when motivation is gone. The biggest practice is to understand that you're going to be better off and you're going to be stronger once you accept this, once you embrace this. But again, when you're trying to resist it, it leaves you stagnant. It arrests your movement and your development. So understand that this is put before you because it is an opportunity for you to grow and to get stronger. And the thing is, it sounds great and it's pretty. And it's easy to be philosophical about somebody else's headache. Mm-hmm. But when you have the headache and you're like, man, this sucks. Or just like if you see a person who's in a relationship and it's clearly a toxic relationship, I can see that because I'm not the person that's in the ring fighting. Mm-hmm. Because I have perspective and I don't have the emotion, I don't have the adrenaline, the fear, the love, the hate involved. But the idea is to have that mentality way before you get there. And that's what helped me through my ordeal, because if I didn't have those things integral to my identity as a young man growing up, there's no way I could have fallen back to that, to strip it away to that that smallest, most, in my mind, it didn't seem like it was a big deal. But now I realize that was the seed that is what created everything else that I'm doing
I hear
today.
you saying that. So the most important discipline you're talking about is the mental game. It all starts with the mental game first, and the messages that you give yourself. There is an opportunity in this. I hear you also saying, remind yourself this is temporary. So where do you see yourself headed, Marcus? I hear you saying you do coaching. That's a part of what you do. You're out there as a teacher. You're really stepping onto some big stages, like TED Talk and things like that. Where do you see yourself headed in your own life, and what are your goals?
My goal is to help people understand, how strong they really are. And I'm doing that, from speaking engagements. I'm doing that in my writings. And that's what I want to kind of show people, is that they don't give themselves enough credit and they don't push themselves enough. It is easy for us, especially in the digital age, to, get this false sense of pacification and to be distracted by these things. But, and that's fine. And you can absolutely live that sort of existence, and that's not bad. But at least for me, once I got hurt and I realized, I was sort of reborn at 40. So it gave me the urgency to actually go out there and to do the things that I wanted to do. So what I would tell people now is to go out and take some time, make yourself uncomfortable, ask yourself some uncomfortable questions, and figure out what you really want. Don't judge yourself because you compromised up to this point. It's okay, because everybody does to an extent. But then move forward and actually do what you want to get done and start working towards that. Don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for somebody to come save you, because it won't happen. It's up to you. Go make it happen right now if you want it to happen.
So for those that are interested in keeping up with the latest incarnation of Marcus Aurelius, where would you send them?
You can find me on marcusaureliusanderson.com. You can find me on LinkedIn under that same handle, Instagram, that same handle. I have a page on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. And that's what I'm going for. I'll have a book that'll be out called The Gift of Adversity, Overcoming Pain and Paralysis to Find Purpose. And that's what I'm trying to do right now, is to help people understand that there is a purpose, but it's up to them to find it. I'll walk to hell with you, but I can't do it for you.
I'm looking forward to reading your book, Marcus. I want to thank you for sharing the gift of your story. It's a powerful one. And thank you for being willing to be vulnerable enough to share it.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy for the opportunity. And if I can help somebody, that's what we're here to do, right?
I want to put in another plug from Marcus Aurelius Anderson. Editing the show, I can't thank that man enough for sharing his wisdom. I'd encourage anybody out there that's inspired by Marcus as I am to go buy his book, check out his website, and even plug into his Instagram feed. The guy's a Spartan there, and he's constantly pumping out tidbits of wisdom. His Instagram handle is his name, no spaces. As for this show, if you enjoyed it, do me a favor and share it with 3 people. I'm here to grow a community of overcomers, and that's really not going to happen if people aren't sharing it. So if you found it valuable, share it, comment if you can, and subscribe. If you want to check out the newsletter, visit www.pioneersofinsight.com. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, if you're interested in QH Cubed, I'll put the links in the show notes. All right, folks, wishing you grace to fill your sails. Stay great in the meantime, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for somebody to come save you, because it won't happen. It's up to you.